So welcome back to the Diary of a CTO, where I am delighted to be joined by this week's guest, Matt Westrup, CTO for Hearst Networks. Matt, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, Guy.
Good. Lovely to have you here with us today. So, Matt, you have, I think it's fair to say, a very interesting and impressive career. You've worked for some of the biggest names in media and broadcasting, and you've spanned roles from camera operator in your early days through to technology leadership and operational leadership. So really interested to hear a little bit more about your journey and your story today. So tell us a bit about yourself, walk us through your career from where it started to where we are today.
Thanks, Guy. Yes, the Matt Westrup origin story, and everyone has brilliant origin stories. They are always unexpected. That's the delight of them. And so, but definitely, if you sort of draw a line from then to now and look back, it is not a linear, smooth arc. It's and it's not. Was never someone that had the 5-year plan with my career. It's been much more about being inspired by opportunities as they come up, and then that giving you more opportunities. And I'm quite I like talking to people that are coming into the industry and saying, look, it's okay not to have that rigid plan. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I started off. Well, I didn't even start off as a camera operator. That is a great example of right time, right place. Going back into the 90s. You won't remember those, but it's a story of what is consistent in my story. Is the story of technology disrupting everything, and there being challenges but new opportunities simultaneously. And I was sort of just in a production company, kind of doing sort of pretty junior roles. And then the first digital video camera, the VX1000, thank you for asking, came out. And that was, I just remember there was a huge conversation. It was like a sort of national debate amongst sort of production and community about this. But I was the person that I reported into was like, let's get you trained up, let's see what you can do. And that opened up a whole sort of world that I was really ready for and couldn't believe that I was getting that opportunity. But the thing that I learned right there and then was the technology part of it was was the less interesting part of it. And the most interesting part of it was, what can I learn and who do I learn from? How do I do this properly? What does good look like? What are the standards that I want to hold myself to? And I think that was an amazing opportunity for me. And then as I sort of progress through there, then inevitably then the same thing happens with post-production and nonlinear editing. And I was one of those sort of early examples of Predator, a terrible sort of portmanteau that squeezing words together. But yes, learned nonlinear editing, and I was sort of there when Avid first kind of came out into the market with that, or Media 100 and so on. And then I didn't know, because I hadn't done any other traditional jobs. I didn't know that this wasn't normal, which was it's brilliant naivety. Don't ever underestimate the power of naivety sometimes and being bold. And then as you progress through, I sort of joined Travel Channel as it was then, and that was a great example of being able to then apply and get to know every moving part of an entire channel operation. It was a sort of a weird, sort of independent yet global operation, if you can imagine such a thing. And same thing happening then, after quite a few years of having this amazing job of flying around the world and filming stuff, which was just an utter privilege. Then looking at, how, again, technology was disrupting not only video, but then media and channel and, digital satellites and how you operate. And you had basically then the digital technology disrupting what had been analog ways of working. And again, I just go back to my sort of naive self and just always being lucky to be surrounded by people that really knew what they were talking about, really knew what they were doing, and who were patient and understanding and encouraging with me, but me kind of going, oh, slow down, hold on, explain that again in ways I can understand, and then applying it to the thing that's in front of me that isn't working. And so I learn television operations by me doing it part-time to start with, and then moving. That was the whole time of going from tape to file-based and remote play out happening, and bringing post-production in-house. And yeah, I think if older me was looking at that project now, I think I would go, younger me, just duck if you can, because it's, it's a very difficult transformation, but it taught me everything, which was great. And then I think then the next sort of evolution for me was lucky enough to sort of be part of what was then Hearst Networks, and then me understanding how to inhabit the leadership me, the executive me, the more corporate me, was just something I hadn't really given much time or energy to, and learnt quite quickly that was something really worth spending time on, actually. So yeah, it's been wild, actually, Guy, and I've enjoyed every moment.
Excellent. I genuinely love your story. I mean, you are probably the first CTO I've met that's sort of gone through that whole domain in one particular industry, and been very hands on through to where you are today. So, what do you feel your kind of unique path into technology? What sort of skills and attributes do you feel it's brought to the role that you embody today?
Yeah. That's interesting, because there will be a lot of my peers that were superb technologists, superb engineers, and that's not my background. And I think firstly what I brought to it, into operations certainly, and then into technology as that sort of developed, was having a pretty good understanding of why we're doing what we're doing, which is storytelling, which is content creation, which is speaking to an audience. Because I have stood there with a camera, filmed stuff. I've gone back to the edit and groaned at what I did and didn't do. I've been there with a blank piece of paper, and trying to work out what the next series or next show is. And so I've never lost that focus on why we're doing what we're doing. And that does open up a really good way of putting value and strategy around what technology is doing for a media business. But that sort of works within TV in and of itself, but I think there are more generic things that the specific route I've taken have given me, where there are deficits in some areas, there are other areas that I've really sort of been drawn to, and that is understanding the power of curiosity. And sometimes that's, like I say, sometimes that's being naive and it being forced on you to learn. But that process of learning and that process of understanding has given me an understanding of the value of communication. It's all very well coming up with vision and an idea, but if you cannot explain that vision, if you can't get people to get behind you, you can't influence people, then the quality of that vision is only half the story. And there are skills, obviously, in having been in production, which means that I've learned, some of that qualities of storytelling and narrative are important in an authentic way, So I think learning the hard way and being able to tell a story are two things that, communication. And, there was a great podcast that Evan Shapiro did with at IBC with Simon Farnsworth at ITV. And he said something that really resonated with me, which is the T in CTO really should be translation.
Yeah.
And that is up, down, left, right, in, out, because again, technology is its own language. It's impenetrable sometimes. And to be able to explain that in a way that people get behind your ideas is definitely a skill.
Yeah,
spending time.
Totally agree. I mean, I look at my sort of close to 20 years in technology recruitment, and I look at how that CTO role has evolved, and I do agree. It's so much now about that translation piece, being that conduit. Technology as a strategy really should be at the beating heart of every business, but actually, communicating the two from technologists to non-technical stakeholders is a very difficult and subtle art to get right. And I totally agree with you. I think the ability to tell stories, take people on the journey, win hearts and minds, that communication piece is often massively underestimated, I think, at the C-suite when you're representing technology. So yeah, I'm glad you kind of brought that up. What other traits do you feel now in your kind of extensive career, and you've been in the CTO role for a number of years, what are the traits do you feel are important to exemplify day to day?
So that is about curiosity. Why are things the way they are? How does that work? Why has that outcome happened? And always turning what could be a challenge into an opportunity. I think that's a really great trait, and keeping level-headed about that. That ability to grow trust and confidence, and that is about repeating performance, right, between you and your teams. You have to build trust. The biggest way of doing that, and I think for operational and technology teams, one of the things that I really prize is business partnering, is partnership with colleagues and other teams, because one of the challenges that you might have within technology and operations, especially in a business that I'm very clear, we're not a technology business. We shouldn't be. We are a storytelling business. We connect with the audience. It's content and creative. I'm there to support that. But you really don't want those teams and those functions to be a silo. Drop the problem in, they'll figure it out. I mean, engineers and operations people are brilliant problem solvers. That's, but you want to make sure that problem solving capabilities, that sort of genius part of what they do, is harnessed as early as possible for the right reasons as possible, in a managed environment, rather than saving the day. And sometimes, let's not shy away from the day does need to be saved, and sometimes that is due to things that aren't your fault, and sometimes it's because of things that you've done. And you have to be good at that and reactive. But that's where, through partnering, and that is communications, understanding, listening, and having that ability for everybody in the team to step out of what people might feel is the typical skills and capabilities of that specific role, to be able to lean into other parts, other skills and ways of talking to people. That builds that trust and that cohesion. And it's a variable path, obviously, ups and downs and ins and outs. But two things I say to the rest of the business is, we're here to help, right? Number one. If you talk to us, and the earlier that you talk to us, the more help we can be. And then thirdly, if we say yes, we're going to mean yes, we've got you. But if we say no, listen to us.
Yeah. So engaging people at the right time, I think, is key, but also being, like say, knowing when to push back, I guess, is also important, isn't it? As a CTO, it's sort of futile to be a yes man and overpromise and underdeliver. And I think that's a really key point that you raised there. And I can tell just by our previous conversations, you'd be very good at brokering that relationship at the C-suite level and with the rest of the business stakeholders. But as a technology leader, how do you go about fostering a culture within your division or within the team or within the wider business, I guess, that does enable that partnering and that collaboration that you speak of?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, again, no point if that's a silo. No point if those sorts of qualities and approaches are not valued by other teams. So you've got to fit into the prevailing culture of the business. And I'm really lucky to be at a business where we take culture really seriously. And we don't take culture really seriously because we are have a naive belief that it's just nice to be nice. We know that the right culture drives performance. High performing teams need to be supported. They know that people have got their back, that there's trust, there's openness, but that there is a reason why we do what we do. And I think that is part of growing that culture, is so that people, in whatever role they do, they understand why they matter, which is where they are adding value is really important. But that there is an expectation to be able to partner people, trust people, and also not to worry too much if it doesn't always work out, because it won't always work out. I mean, businesses are always under pressure. They're busy places. People have got different priorities, different situations, different environments to navigate. So I would say that you definitely want to bring in, how you build that, how do you build trust, and how do you build partnership. Familiarity, I think, is really important, getting to know the people in the team and each other. And that sometimes can feel like quite a trivial thing. That could be the 5 minutes before that meeting when everyone's talking about what they did the weekend, or just, over the coffee machine and so on. But actually, these are little magic moments of familiarity. It grows empathy and a bit of sympathy.
Yeah.
And that can be sometimes, it can be done over video and remotely. I think it's definitely reinforced and amplified by spending time together in our office. So I think familiarity is really important. And understand that people understanding that collaboration is valued, is prized, and why that is. So it's not just be collaborative. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great point that you raised, that in the post-pandemic world, that piece around familiarity, empathy, just the opportunity to forge connections, isn't it, with people? I guess, like I say, it sort of breeds that ability to feel like you can trust in each other, even if at a subliminal level. And it's a tricky thing, I think, to get right in a fully remote environment now. When we started the business, it was literally the tail end of 2019, so just before the pandemic hit. So the sort of founding years of the business, we were a fully remote entity, and we kind of have grown the business as such. But a lot of our communication day to day is done through Teams and through remote video calls, etc. And I do feel it's a difficult thing to really kind of create those connections. When you're a very disparate and remote business, to the degree that we've had to now schedule very regular meetups where we, from the far-flung corners of the country, all come together in a centralized place to actually just spend time in each other's company. So how do you approach that as a business? What's your sort of day-to-day in terms of hybrid versus remote, and what do you think is the ideal in the times that we're living in now?
So I think it's completely possible to do all those things remotely, and there are some really good examples, and you seem very thoughtful about it. And I think being thoughtful is the starting point, not just assuming these connections happen. But
yeah,
I think the blend is important. I think that flexibility in some degrees always is going to stay. Although there's definitely a trend now, and there are some notable examples of companies going back to 5 days. But our approach is to retain that flexibility, but that's expressed in different ways. It's not just the balance between the time spent in the office and the time spent at home. There are other ways of expressing that balance. And we value time together, not time in the office. Office is where that togetherness can happen, but it's time together, not time in the office, that's important for us. And so when we look at that, and it's evolved, we've all evolved, haven't we, since the pandemic, no one's got the right path through, but there are lots of very good behaviors that you can see that you can adopt. And so what we've said is, for the time in the office, that all has to be together. Everyone has to be on the same days.
Okay.
Because it is the togetherness that we value. Whereas, so we've moved from a model where there was more flexibility, perhaps, in terms of people choosing it, which I think was the right thing to do as we are coming back post-pandemic. But I think now we can really see that, especially in TV, there's a sort of that's how we identify. It's a creative space for everybody, not just the creatives. It's great for all of us. It's fast moving. There are challenges, and like I said, trust is a shortcut in business. Familiarity is a shortcut in business. You want to get something done, if you can explain it in one sentence as you pass by someone's desk, and you trust that person to act on it, rather than, because one of the challenges about remote working is every interaction tends to have to be a scheduled Teams meeting.
Yeah.
And then you fill the space, right? So, I mean, that's our approach anyways, is definitely amplifying time together.
Yeah, I think that's such an important, it's a subtle but fundamental difference. I think the togetherness element, rather than time spent in a particular location. And I've seen some companies come back to post-pandemic world with, I think, relatively futile policies around this, where I remember doing a video call once with quite a senior director in the business who lived in the Midlands, but then their new sort of post-pandemic policy was to be in the office 3 days a week. Sorry. And we were doing a video call. I was like, "Where are you today?" It's like, "Well, I'm in the office." I was like, "It's a bit quiet there, isn't it?" And he literally got his laptop and showed round the office, and he was the only person in the office there. And it's such an important distinction to make, isn't it? The value that you get, it's not about presentism. It's kind of looking at the same problem through two lenses, isn't it? One is about what do we get actually being together, in the collaboration, the creativity element that's created whilst we're in each other's company, and the other is that probably where we were in a pre-pandemic world, which is the lack of trust, right? The people, if they're not within the office environment, are not working, and so on and so forth.
That's right. And that, again, it's trust, and that is, that's a sort of triumph of the letter over the spirit, isn't it? And absence has made the heart grow fonder for the office, and actually we've all thought harder about what the value is, and the value isn't work happens in an office. It's about teams happen in an office.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Cool. So you mentioned obviously the domain, the industry you're in. It's a creative space. The TV media industry has undergone huge evolution in the last few years with the rise of kind of streaming services and that sort of thing. So just interested to hear, as a technology leader, how do you approach maintaining that competitive advantage in such a fast-paced world, where we've seen the level of disruption and evolution that we have, in TV and media. Talk us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the disruption has been, I mean, I'll say on one part, it's, there's two speeds simultaneously that it has been so rapid and yet so slow, because I remember being in the audience at various conferences probably now 15 years ago with people saying it's only got 2 or 3 years left, and here we still are, so it's definitely evolution, but the pace of change now obviously is incredibly clear for everyone. And expressing my approach through how Hearst Networks operates, I think is more relevant, because I think it's relevance and partnership for us and for me. So you take here's some amazing advice that my then head of production back when I started as a cameraman was a guy called Tim Ball. And there was this real nervousness about this little digital camera that was turning the world upside down, this VX1000, and how that was going to change, and what are people's roles now. And he said to me then, and it's talking about mid-90s, and he said, look, when you look at storytelling, an audience, these are enduring human intrinsic realities. Storytelling is what humans have used forever. And the technologies will just change how we express, how that's manifested. And so if you keep your eye on that core, then that's the thing to focus on. And I don't think that's good echo now for me to think, because ultimately there are two ways of looking at streaming, which is it's been an absolutely fundamental, it's sort of blitzed how TV worked, and it's come up with something very new and disrupted everything, or it's a minor change in the technology of distribution, i.e. It's still storytelling, but and what's interesting is now there's so much focus on the big screen in the home again,
Yeah.
So it's how you get to that big screen, I guess, is perhaps. But you're right in terms of how you do that, and the business model is the thing that you have to, that's the challenge rather than the storytelling bit, I guess. But relevance for your audience, number one. Partnership for us, second one. So as everyone else is going through those evolutions, and those platforms are going through those evolutions, and audiences are, you have to partner with, that's the thing, and that's again for the long term. And the value in partnership is something that definitely Hearst, wider Hearst takes very seriously, and we do as well. So I think those two things, from a technology point of view, again, that is about ensuring that we all have the change mindset, that people understanding it's learning, not failing, that it's about that curiosity being turned into enduring positive change, but being on the challenge of change is being honest about what that takes and what the limitations are, especially for a business of our size. So I think change mindset, and then of course new skills, and that's training and through recruitment. But you have to shift your weight. That's one of the things that broadcasters have had to do. It's quite a difficult trick, is that, you have to keep what you're good at and what you've done traditionally going, and becoming ever more efficient, and ever, not dropping the ball at all on that, and shifting your way into something that's slightly unfamiliar, a bit more chaotic. There's less formulas around how you do what you do, and there's more risk and peril. So it's keeping a cool head. The technology itself, yeah, I mean that's what technology teams do. So that's in some ways not to downplay it, because it's extraordinary, but at the same time that's probably not the most significant thing about managing through that change.
No, I think it's a very good point around, you look at, I suppose, the evolution of where we are in the streaming world now, and it is more of it's a distribution conversation, isn't it, more than actually the fundamental shift in what it is to be creative and create good content. And I guess arguably in the world that we're living in now, with the rise of AI and a lot of tools that are out there, it's probably as exciting as it's ever been before in ability to create genuinely, unique and fast-paced creative content. So interested to get your thoughts. It's been 24 minutes and we've only just gone onto the world of AI. That's probably a record, actually. I don't Normally AI raised its head slightly earlier than that, and I'm the one that brought it in. But
Bit of relief, frankly.
yeah, exactly. 24 minutes apiece. But on that note, wouldn't be a 2025 tech podcast if we didn't talk about it in some way, shape, and form. But how do you feel? You talked there about the talent landscape, and I know some of our previous conversations we've spoken about how we feel the shift in AI is potentially moving the needle in terms of how teams are now structured, and I guess the opportunities that exist in the world today for particularly younger people entering into the world of work. But yeah, what are your thoughts on how AI is impacting, I guess, your marketplace in particular, from a content creation point of view, but from a wider kind of talent landscape? What are your thoughts?
So talent landscape, there are two speeds of AI. There is the speed of AI, which is the rate of change, velocity of change, and probably coming out of two centers really, which is California and then China. Which this is breathtaking. Every day the news, the capabilities, the changes, the potential. But then there is the human speed of change. Organizations and humans, there's only so quick that they can adapt, and it is slower than the speed of the technology that we are dealing with. And AI never has that gap been bigger, I don't think. And so there is a kind of natural time, and I think it's well worth it, because I'm talking a lot about dualities today, that AI is just another technology that disrupts and changes how we do things, fine, and yet it really isn't just another technology. There's something far more profound about AI, because it is asking us questions about human value, what we do, who we are even. And so, of course, I think it's quite healthy. In fact, there is a speed of adoption that is far slower than the speed of progress within technology in and of itself. And I don't think there has been enough thought. There's an awful lot of speculation and conversation around roles. And of course, from the pure AI side, there's a lot of 2 to 3 years that'll be unrecognizable. And then there is, well, hold on a minute. How much have we really thought about human value and the kind of society that we want, and therefore, and who gets to own that? Firstly, that conversation and that outcome, because we all do, really.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that AI makes human and humanness more important, not less important.
Yeah.
Because if it's going to do stuff that we're not that interested in, then what are we interested in?
Yeah.
So that's all quite highfalutin. But the practical thing is, obviously, from a recruitment point of view, one of the kind of questions out there is, there's sort of here quite a lot at the moment. Yeah, AI is really good. That it really needs a seasoned, experienced person to be able to, know where it's gone wrong, and so this feels very comfortable. If you're 20 years into your career, where are those next leaders coming? Where are those next experienced people coming? Have we thought hard enough about it? Absolutely not. We have not thought hard enough about
Totally agree.
the talent pipeline. So that's one thing. The second thing then is, how do we collaborate with AI, not compete with it? How do we evolve and change how we do what we do? And how do we think about the different values that humans and at work that we can give? So it's, what are the kind of human characteristics that are going to be important going forward? It is going to be communication. It is going to be ethics, value, trust. It is going to be nuance. It is going to be critical thinking, whole brain thinking. All these things are going to be really important going forward. But for sure, we will have a challenge in terms of the landscape being sort of highly disrupted. I'm not sure if it'll happen at the speed that California tech bros tell us it's going to happen, because I think humans are going to be human about it, and I think that's actually quite reassuring.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the point you make about we all own that conversation, I think, is a very apt one, because it's all about the level of adoption ultimately, isn't it? I mean, I guess in a capitalist society, the companies with the most money are investing in these things, and then we're all adopting those tools. But I think you're right. At some point, there is the opportunity that should happen really, where humans do question, like you say, what kind of society do we actually want to build? We're the ones creating these tools at the end of the day, so we're the ones that ultimately can vote with our feet as to how we use them and how we adopt them. But I guess, the one thing that's for sure is they're not going anywhere, are they? They're here to stay. And I think the point around collaboration versus competing, I think, is a very good one. And I do think there needs to be this mindset shift in seeing it as the more of a set of tools rather than the solution. And I still think in a lot of industries, and the way a lot of people think about it, is it's there to replace rather than to augment. And I think if we can look at it through that lens of what it is to be in business, is to solve problems for other people. Like I said, it goes back full circle to, it's about what is it to be a person and what are those problems that we can solve for people. And that's the bit I'm quite reassured by, that I agree. I think as AI continues to evolve, it's only going to accentuate the value that humans have to each other and what it is to be human versus a digital entity. And that's why I think that, like you say, going back to your point about communication and how we actually spend time with each other and what it is to be around each other and form those connections, that's ultimately what being human is. I know we're getting into the very kind of philosophical nieces.
Well, we are, and that doesn't really help people whose jobs are being closed by where is it going to hit. But AI is such a mixed bag, and I think it would be foolish to trust any one view at this point. On the one hand, we've got the progress is going to be extraordinary, and these are the impacts. And then you've got the MIT report that came in the summer saying that basically only 5% of corporate AI pilots delivered value to the bottom line. Which is kind of interesting, which I think speaks to the light speed of AI and the kind of mud that messy human organizations tend to inhabit. Probably it doesn't really talk too much in it. Is it overhyped? Yes, of course it's overhyped, and yet it simultaneously is not overhyped. And so I just think I think organizations that give time to think about these things, it is time well spent.
Yes, I very much agree. Well, that could be its own separate podcast. I'm sure we could continue delving into the realms of AI, but for now,
that's what the world needs, is another AI podcast.
Isn't it just, eh? Don't worry, we won't do that. So let's talk a little bit more about your journey. And again, I'd like to pick into some of the challenges you probably faced throughout your career. Because I think it's always good to talk about the things that have worked, and you've shared a huge amount of value today, just in terms of your thoughts on the world and your your approach to strategy. But I'm sure there's a few skeletons in the closet as well that, like you say, the lessons, the learnings that are good to talk about, because that's ultimately how you become better. So talk us through, what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced throughout your career, and how did you overcome them?
Well, firstly, I think it's worth just checking in on the fact there are the challenges I haven't faced, and I haven't been subject to, as far as I can tell, kind of discrimination, or I've been lucky to just be surrounded by amazing people, bullying or those sorts of things. So just to acknowledge that, being who I am, there are lots that I haven't faced as a challenge. And so one of the things that certainly earlier on in my career, going from suddenly now I'm a camera operator, and suddenly now I'm head of operations, suddenly now I'm CTO, the imposter syndrome, which is something that is incredibly common, and in fact, actually, probably part of everybody to some. If you don't have doubts about doing something, what was it David Bowie said? If you're not slightly out of your depth, if you can only just touch the ocean floor with your toes, then you need to be a certain amount of discomfort to do good things. That's what being out of your comfort zone feels like. And so there were those challenges for sure. And that was, going from, again, a kind of a rather siloed. I started off in really corporate production, video production. What would the real world of TV made for me? I'm an imposter. I don't really do that, and then I don't really do operations. So that's that kind of, how do I inhabit those areas? And a good example was what does the executive self, what's executive me look like? What does the leader me look like? And how do I do that authentically? And that's that great phrase that's kept me honest, hopefully, is that is to be yourself with skill. And I think that's a really beautifully put sentiment, that you don't want to, some great advice I had from in one point of my career when I was stepping up quite a bit. I was a bit nervous about it, and the coach I was seeing at the time said, "You've got this far being you. Don't try to be somebody else. Don't contort yourself into something that you think people want.
Yeah.
It's about being yourself with skill." And that was really valuable.
Yeah.
I think some of the other challenges then, specific to the industry, is the challenge of change. That's hard. That's constant. When you talk about the never normal and constant change and so on, it just has the change overhead on people is really hard. And so you have to be able to be, yes, the activities probably can feel relentless. And again, you have to go back to why does it matter? And how do we, approach, both those imposters of disaster and success and with sort of in an equal way. So I think change is one of the things that I've been talking about being dragged through a hedge backwards. Sometimes, certainly earlier in my career, I didn't realize its change was what I was sort of not managing at that time, because it was just activities and a goal. And you realize I had absolutely no thought on how I was going to manage the process of change and how it made people feel and what I want, to get out of it. So I think that was another challenge, I think.
Such a complex, you say the word change. It's a very, very short to the point word, but there's so many different facets and considerations to take into account, which you don't really necessarily appreciate until you, I guess, start stepping into those more leadership roles and you see the impact not just on yourself but on other people and all the different sort of facets you have to consider. So I think that's a great point. But just going back to the point you made at the beginning of that question around imposter syndrome, I think it's one of those things. That's why I love doing this podcast, because I selfishly learn a lot from speaking to all these incredible people, and I'm amazed how often imposter syndrome as an answer or a question, an answer or a concept, it rears its head in people that you look at their kind of profile and you speak to them and they're incredibly competent and adept, and it's just amazing how often it pops up as something that people really do experience in the world of work. And I now, from having had this conversation with quite a few people, I see it as such a positive thing that people have that element of imposter syndrome. It's something I see as one of the traits and characteristics actually of a more successful technology leader, because I think it just boils down to awareness, sort of self-awareness.
Yes, it's the people that don't have it you have to worry about.
Exactly. Yeah,
you're exactly right. It's about self-awareness.
Yeah.
And if you don't have questions, you're not thoughtful about those questions, then you're not developing yourself. And so it is natural, I think, to do that. And it's sort of been blown a bit out of proportion, hasn't it? I think imposter syndrome, because it feels like it's almost a barrier.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not a barrier.
It's
a sort of an accelerant.
Yeah, absolutely. The more as I say, the positive I look at it through, the more that you know about something, the more you realize you don't know. And that's the point. It's the kind of, again, getting into the philosophical realms here. But
I love that. Let's do that podcast. Because I read something the other day, and I don't know where the quote came from, so apology, and I'll probably get it wrong, but it was, what you don't know is ignorance, but knowing what you don't know is intelligence. That's the same. I think that speaks to that imposter syndrome.
Absolutely. You said it in a far more articulate way than I, but yeah, absolutely. Cool. Really, really interesting to hear a little bit more about that. And what I was keen to draw upon now, if I may, is just to think about your approach to growing your teams, hiring in. We've talked a little bit about the AI landscape. We've talked a little bit about the talent landscape as a result of that. And, you've spoken very well about the culture, that's required to build a successful team. But what sort of traits and characteristics do you look for now when you're hiring for professionals into your team? It could be, I'm not necessarily interested in what makes a good software engineer or, what makes a good QA engineer, but it's sort of, are there any overarching innate traits and characteristics that you feel you look for when it comes to people joining the business.
Well, you're right. I mean, you can kind of assume excellence in your domain as a starting point, really, and in your experience. But when all the things we've just been talking about end up for me in a kind of values-based recruitment environment, and that is getting to understand how people react to change, what they're proud of, what motivates them, how they collaborate, how they communicate, what right looks like, and the more expansive qualities beyond the technical domain that you're in. How do you make that matter to somebody else? How do you make sure that what you're building or the problem you're solving is understood and is driving the business? Because at the end of the day, and this is the other thing I'm really key on for me and my teams and the technology strategy we've got, it is ultimately about business value. If you are in a technology company and your product is technology, then that's nice and clear. But that's not what we do. So I have to make sure that what we do is relevant. And so having an understanding of that, where you fit and how you drive value is really important. So, and as AI disrupts those things, it's again going back to what are the human qualities that are enduring and going to be more important, not less important. And that is whole brain thinking, that is collaboration, that is critical thinking, that is understanding what's relevant. So those are things that I really enjoy having conversations with when we're in recruitment phase. And again, like you get to talk to loads of amazing people, and you can only recruit one person out of all the amazing people that you've seen, but you can learn a lot from that process as well. And ultimately that's what makes a difference when it's like, oh, who am I hiring? I mean, usually by the time you get to interview, any one of you could start tomorrow and you're going to be fine. And it's just which one do you gravitate to and for what reasons.
I love that approach, and it definitely resonates and echoes with a lot of what I see in the market is the better clients to have the better cultures out there. When I say better, it's sort of
I mean, culture is frustratingly difficult to articulate and pin down, and in a way it should be, because it's evolved. The whole point about culture is that it should evolve. It's dynamic, and there's no right or wrong culture within obvious limits. And so it's about what you think is important to you in your business and how you do it, and making sure that you prioritize that as something to concentrate on from leadership.
Hiring against values thing. You kind of summed it up absolutely. I thought, well, look, really, really enjoyed the conversation today. Not only hearing more about your individual journey, which I think has been, very entertaining and very awe-inspiring, but also, your thoughts on the world and kind of where we are today. So I'd like to draw to a close every episode, if you would care to humour me, which is with the question of, what would you say has been your one favourite piece of advice that you've ever received throughout your, well, I say career, life? Could be in a personal context or a career context that kind of sticks with you on the journey.
So I am a magpie when it comes to advice. I collect it, and it is wonderful. Brilliant at telling other people what I'm terrible at applying it to my own situation. And all the way through from my parents and my family, my wife and my friends and all the amazing people I've worked with, there are so many different layers of advice that I pop up in my head at different times. But for my CTO role, I think one of the things this was just sitting in an audience listening to someone talk many years ago, and they said technology is 90% people and 10% technology, and that sticks with me.
Yeah, I very much agree, and I think a lovely way to sign off on this episode. And so, not a lot remains but to say thank you again for coming and having a chat with us.
My absolute pleasure. It's been a delight. Thank you, guys.
Would love to have you back at some point. I'm sure we can delve into the philosophical realms of humanity, or where we are at that point in time. But
maybe don't post that one. We'll just do it over coffee.
Sounds good. But no, thanks again, and wish you all the very best with Hearst Networks. And I hope to speak soon.
Thank you so much.